Hi again. I thought I would do a quick sort of how to attach elements part when you're creating a pendant or something and you have multiple elements. So this will just be an easy introductory early phase to this piece. This has multiple pieces, as you can see, for different elements. And basically what I've done is I've cut out and done a tree with a path on it. This piece really is, it'll shrink down a little bit when it comes out of the kiln, but it's a substantial sized pendant. So I'm going to give it a nice bail for a heavy duty chain so that it feels nice and sturdy on someone's neck, or they can use a leather um, toggle or something to leather strap to use for their chain. But I wanted to just quickly show you how to clean up. So once you get these elements finished, the edges in some cases can be quite bad or frayed, strange, wonky, different than you want them to be. And so what you usually do is you can take a file. I have some files available for students here, but also you can just take an emery board if you're at home and clean up the edges of your piece when you have some extra bits of clay or something that have come to the surface, or you just really don't like the way something looks. This is a good time to think about if you'd like to carve something, because in the greenware or the leather hard state, which is where we're at now in this clay, it's much easier to carve and control than it is when it's in the wet state. So this is a really good point to make your choices if you wanted to deepen a pattern, if you want to add something into it, some sort of element. As you can see, I actually added the path on this one because I thought that it would just be really nice to see that on this pendant. And then I've added a piece, and I'll show you how to add this piece to the back. Basically, this says each one enters on their own path. So I thought that would be a lovely little saying for the back of this pendant. So when you turn your pendant or your piece over, sometimes you'll get this strange pattern that's on the Teflon sheet that you don't want. And oftentimes what I do is I just take a damp paintbrush and smooth all of that out. And I've done that to this point to give it a nice smooth surface, because when I add this element, I'm going to be pretty much finished with how the back is going to look on that. And I don't want to continue to work at it. I mean, I want to have it as smooth and as clean as possible before it goes into the kiln so that it looks really, pretty much finished when it pops out of the kiln and we can pop it into the stainless steel shot and get it cleaned up in the burnisher. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this element to the back. And usually what I do is I start with a little bit. We have clay that comes into a syringe. It comes like this from the organization that I get it from, Art Clay World. And you just put a little bit on the back. It works kind of like a glue or a paste. And I like to have my syringes in a little container that has some water in it in order to keep them from drying out, because once they dry out, they're a little more difficult to handle. I know that my bail is going to be a little bit higher up, so I want to keep this a little bit low. I want it to be noticeable, but I don't want it to be right at the top. So this is how the back will appear on this pendant. This will be the front, and this will be the back of the pendant. So now what you do is you just kind of see if it marries nicely, if it lays down nice and smoothly. If you see any gaps, like I can kind of see a little gap right at the join, I would take a little bit of syringe, a little bit more, and I would add that right here, and then just use a paintbrush with a little damp paintbrush and kind of work all of this together, and it just joins perfectly. It really makes quite a nice piece, and it holds it together really beautifully. When it comes out of the kiln, it looks as if they were one piece. They were never actually two pieces, which is really kind of a cool thing. You want to make sure it's nice and centered, or wherever you want it, because sometimes maybe you don't want an element to be perfectly centered. Maybe you want something a little bit off for interest or looks or whatever. So after this goes together, and this kind of came together really quickly, you just go ahead and pop it on. I have a little hot plate here, and I'm going to pop that on the hot plate and make sure it gets good and dry. All of these pieces have to be really dry before they go in the kiln, because if they don't, they actually can crack, pop, and sometimes actually explode if they're too wet. So I have joined that piece, and I will likely go ahead and give that a little bit of a cleanup after it gets nice and dry. And then I'll add my other elements, which you can see I have a nice little piece, a nice little bezel I created out of clay for the square stone that will be at the beginning of the path. Give it a little bit of interest in the movement of the piece that I think will be nice. And then you can see I created this kind of flourished bale that will be really, hopefully will hold its shape in the kiln. I'll have to create something to help that, because it'll be a little bit more difficult to hold its shape in the kiln like that. But usually what I do is I put the flat element on first. Obviously that makes the most sense. Then anything that has a little bit of dimension, that's when you add it. You add it after, because it can be difficult to add flat pieces to more developed pieces that have a lot of shape to them. And you usually add your most shapely element last, because it's just the easiest to handle once you've got all your pieces together. So this will be the piece that I will have at the class tomorrow, and I will likely go ahead and fire this with the rest of the pieces, and then we'll get to have a look at how it turned out. But anyway, just a really quick way of working with metal clay. You like to use a little bit of water and some files, a little bit of sandpaper, and work with it in a gentle way, because it's still pretty fragile at this point. So anyway, I hope that this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing the folks that will be in the class tomorrow. All right, bye-bye.